Informative and unpredictable, testing the limits like only we can. From Span Enterprises in Rock Hill, South Carolina, it's the Bandit Room. Welcome to the Bandit Room. I'm Charles, and I'm joined today by our special guests, Stephanie and Elena. Thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely.
All right. We've got a few topics to go through today, and we're going to start with the situation in Puerto Rico. They've it's undoubtable they've recently been hit by a real disaster down there. I'd like to talk for a little bit. Just I don't want to dwell on the little things, whether you think it could have been handled differently. I'd really like to just stick to kind of what's been going on down there, and maybe dispel some of these notions that somehow Puerto Rico is somehow freeloading off of the United States, and we've somehow generously provided this aid. I want to dispel that a little bit because Puerto Rico, it's a United States territory. It's not a state. That's the big basic thing about Puerto Rico. But at the same time, every person born in Puerto Rico is an American citizen by birth. You can't dispute that. They are American citizens, and the United States acquired Puerto Rico over 100 years ago. That's something that the United States acquired. It's a territory of ours. The way I see it, if you acquire something, it's your job to take care of that. So, regardless of whether or not they are technically a state, they have a different taxation setup down there. Interesting thing, people think that Puerto Rico is somehow this sort of tax-free haven down there where they don't have to contribute to the United States tax system. It's not entirely true. It definitely is different than in the United States. For example, the big notable difference with Puerto Rico is they do not have the federal income tax. So anybody making a living in Puerto Rico is not liable to pay federal income taxes. That does not mean they are tax-free. They still pay into Social Security. They still pay import-export taxes, federal commodity taxes, Medicare, things like that. There's a lot of different ways that Puerto Rico is indeed taxed by the United States. So just wanted to kind of dispel that a little bit. Also, when something like that hits Puerto Rico, it affects them differently than it does when the United States gets hit, for the simple reason that 43% of the island's residents are living at the poverty level. The median household income in 2015 in Puerto Rico was $19,000. So, just to give you kind of a massive, difference between, the median household income in the United States, which is like double that. It's harder for somebody to rebound in that sort of situation when, the deck is basically stacked against you. Anybody else want to weigh in on Puerto Rico and what's been going on down there?
I think we should definitely touch points on how many of these homes have insurance. You're talking about being at poverty level.
Yeah.
How does that play in?
That's a good question.
I heard something less than 50% of homes in Puerto Rico have house insurance.
Wow.
Yeah.
And even if they do, a lot of times flood insurance is not included in the policy.
That's true.
Which is a tremendous hit on anyone's budget.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That is major.
I'm sure insurance in general, just being on an island, I mean, we can imagine we're pretty close to the coast. We understand we have friends that aren't able to afford flood insurance being added unless it is required. So I am certain that being on an island, flood insurance is required if you have insurance. That's probably a good reason for that being a little lower than 50%.
Plus, imagine how difficult it would be if your overall income is only $19,000. That might be okay to get by throughout the year on overall lower prices on the island. But when you think of when you have to restore your home and you have to buy all the equipment, the pipes, the wood, the roofing material from the mainland, you have to pay the prices plus the tax and import all of that with the prices from the mainland. Which can go up drastically.
That's a great point.
That is a big point, because they are liable to import and export taxes. So to rebuild the country, they're going to be importing things from all over the place. So it's going to be a big deal. Interesting.
I had read that there were $95 billion worth of damages here in this last hurricane that hit, which is just astronomical.
And the way, like you mentioned about the houses, they were hit, and I think they've estimated, that it's going to be months, before
Mm-hmm.
you can even think about getting power back to everybody and things like that. I mean, as I understand it, a lot of the big cities, things like that, they're starting to look more like business as usual. But at the same time, you leave the city, you're going to be in these rural areas and the mountains and things like that just catastrophic. It's unbelievable.
The other thing that we have a personal friend of mine, and he was saying that it was a similar situation to Katrina, which had hit New Orleans, that they had to let a levee go in order to help maintain other places. So it was catastrophic, just not from the hurricane alone, but also consequences thereafter while they were trying to manage flooding, which I can imagine just compounds the situation so much more.
Yeah.
I think another thing that could contribute even more to already difficult situation is the publicity that PR is getting with beaches being destroyed, the hotels, the ports, that tourism will decline, which is the main source of income for majority of the folks out there.
That is true.
That's true. There's messaging issues on both sides. If the message is out there that the island is ravaged, then people are not going to want to go there.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if the message to the opposite is that, oh, they've done an A+ job rebuilding the place, I mean, and it's no secret that the tone has been relatively congratulatory among the administration over the past events. That sort of sets the tone to deny more funding or people not to give as much to these organizations. Because the impression is that, oh, it's already taken care of. We sent our troops. We sent a ship. We sent the Army Corps of Engineers or whatever that may be. It sets the tone to say like, oh, yeah, we did that. We took care of it. Wipe our hands and go on with our lives. But this is going to be months of rebuilding for these people.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that people need to definitely consider.
Absolutely. I wonder if there's more that we can do to help give back.
Definitely. I think as consumers, we could definitely support the tourism industry. So don't be afraid to head out there and support Puerto Ricans. I think that will help them the most in the long run. And after all, there are lots of charities. I actually looked up the list of great charities that are approved to donate towards the rebuilding effort by Guidestar, and we'll add it to the notes.
Add it to okay.
So anyone can donate, and other than just the funds, the cash that you can donate, you can also donate lots of different supplies that are in just a dire need. Anything from basic medication and food to building materials, which not everyone thinks about that.
But it's very needed. You're right.
Yeah, for sure. I'm interested to see how the progression will go as far as Puerto Rico's statehood. There's been a history of Puerto Rico has voted several times on referendums that they would like to become a state. But again, of course, it's not completely up to Puerto Rico. The Congress still needs to legislate that. So I wonder if there's going to be a renewed interest in Puerto Rico wanting to become a United States, part of the United States even more, so that they can finally get that voting power in the Congress and Senate. And also the ability to vote for president, which they don't have. They're liable to certain things, but they don't have. They're still a part of the United States without the representation at the moment.
Yeah, so I do wonder if there's going to be a renewed interest, like you said, from our federal government, and where that's going to have our leadership and what they're going to be saying about that. And we think like we all went full force into Haiti when there was the earthquake. We had spoken about that earlier, and it's so important that we go and help other people, and we help people of our own great nation and of other great nations. But again, it is going to be quite an interesting conversation, and I am very intrigued to see where it goes. Yeah. Can you imagine a world where we have 51 states?
51 states. We'll have to redo the flag.
Exactly.
It'll be funny.
It'll be very interesting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing. If they've been talk of kind of holding this budget situation over their heads, and I don't know if you're going to throw the fact out that they're not paying federal income taxes, it's not like they haven't wanted to, because they voted to become a state, and if they were a state, they would be liable to that. Yeah. So, it's in our court basically. If we want to include them, then it's up to us, or if we're going to keep them on a leash in the ocean. They'll always be in the ocean, but that's
you're not gonna pull them into.
Not gonna pull them into the van. Bring them on in. No.
Well, I do think it would be very different to have another state added, but just in general, that being overseas, technically, over the ocean territory would be interesting and new. So
sounds good. Well, in addition to we talked about the ways that you can give to these events, these catastrophic occurrences that have been happening. Our next topic relates to that. People have heard of the Black Friday. People have heard of Cyber Monday. One thing people may not be aware of is what they call Giving Tuesday, which is the Tuesday after Thanksgiving. Many charities and nonprofits use that as a time to boost funds, raise funds during that kind of peak time when people are thinking about the holidays and giving back, things like that. Elena, you deal quite a bit with nonprofits. Would you care to elaborate a little bit more on the topic of Giving Tuesday?
Giving Tuesday actually has become has been placed in has been known since about 2012, which is when the entire hashtag trend became super popular. So anywhere you see the Giving Tuesday, it's usually listed with the hashtag Giving Tuesday. The main thing about it is, again, giving. And what I think is that the nonprofits, when they came up with this idea, they wanted to, first of all, stay on the trend, hashtags, having a special day. Just like the other day, we celebrated a coffee, National Coffee Day. And I think having your designated holiday is kind of a thing now for any type of industry. I think that the nonprofits wanted to be part of this trend. It has become a very popular thing, and year after year, donations grow, awareness grows, and there is an actual website, givingtuesday.org, that any nonprofit can use to get resources, whether it is a template for emails, ideas on how to fundraise, how to advertise. There's a lot of great things that nonprofits can use to employ this hashtag Giving Tuesday.
Okay, now there's a little bit of a controversy to it, is there not? Like, some people are saying that it's not necessarily a good thing for nonprofits or charities to put all of their eggs in this one basket or something like that. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I definitely think that there's been a lot of conversation in particular about how charities are meant to bring in community involvement, and that's a really big part of what the message of Giving Tuesday is. However, my opinion is that we wait until the last minute. Giving Tuesday happens the Tuesday after Thanksgiving, so we are waiting until people have gone out, spent their Christmas money, are almost against their tax deadline. And in reality, it's mostly larger corporations that are coming back in and spending their money during that time. So I don't know. Does it really drive community interaction? Is it really a volunteer effort of pulling everybody together in order to constantly support this charity? Or is it just a one-time deal, spend it while you have it?
It's
Consumerism at its best.
That's a possibility. I mean, most nonprofits make a great deal of their income during those last couple months of the year, isn't that right?
Yeah, that is correct.
So this would contribute to that.
Exactly. Some of the nonprofits report up to 40% of their gross receipts being collected during the Giving Tuesday and following weeks after that, which is a huge amount if you think about that. But then getting back with you on the fact that it's only during the holiday time. On the other hand, we have 60% that also are collected throughout the rest of the year. So it's not necessarily that people only donate after the procrastinating time of the holidays. I think that nonprofits do strive to put efforts throughout the year. I just think that having Giving Tuesday gives them a good, trendy excuse to reach out to their supporters and collect some extra funds.
You don't think is it a stress on these nonprofits to operate throughout the year if they're relying on so much seasonal revenue towards the end of the year, and then by the maybe the second or third quarter of the year they start to get more strained financially?
It is possible. However, I think that nonprofits that try to sustain themselves and do well for themselves and for their cause, they plan ahead. So even if they don't operate as much throughout the year and just kind of bunch up all the efforts towards the Giving Tuesday, that also means that their staffing, that their expenses are leaner earlier in the year.
Okay. So perhaps there's, they should still promote the Giving Tuesday. Make as much out of it as they can. Obviously, and get as much income as you can. That's how everything operates. But at the same time, I think they still need to be utilizing their resources effectively, because at the end of the year, that's when people are the busiest. They've got their own family obligations, work obligations, end of year deadline things to worry about. As far as recruiting, volunteers or people to help out with certain things, that needs to be a yearly effort for most organizations. They need to have that, interest throughout the year, not just at Christmas time or whenever it's convenient for us. So, maybe they promote the Giving Tuesday, but then they reach back out to those people, throughout the year to say, hey, we're looking for volunteers for this or that or whatever that may be. I think there really needs to be a push round the clock, round the year, for these nonprofits to help, get the volunteers they need, the people they can to work with to.
I agree, and I think that most of the nonprofits do that. The thing about the time of the holidays is also historically the time of giving. Your traditional Salvation Army red pots by the stores, soup kitchens, gifts, giving, all of that kind of ties into the Giving Tuesday idea. And also, all the preparation for Giving Tuesday usually starts as early as September. Right now, nonprofits are talking about Giving Tuesday. So it's not just in November they hurry up and try to go ahead and have a hashtag Giving Tuesday. Trust me, they work throughout the year to get ready for it.
Okay. My main hope is that the smaller nonprofits just don't fall to, or default, that is, to waiting until Giving Tuesday to push most of their marketing efforts there, because it does seem that the larger nonprofits, for instance, I would think the American Red Cross, they would have the ability to use their marketing efforts in events where people would donate in order to come to the event and that sort of thing. So my issue with that is that I know there are so many small nonprofits that have less of a marketing department or people to help with that. And I hope that they just don't default to taking the trend. That's true.
If you're starting now as a small nonprofit, you're starting in October, you're basically putting off any sort of donation that you would receive if you're promoting it too heavily. Then you may not, your October is going to be short on revenue or resources or whatever that may be.
Absolutely.
They run that risk.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to break for a quick commercial. We'll be back after this.
You never know when you're going to need an old document. Maybe you've been audited, or maybe you're just tidying up some accounts. Instead of keeping all your files in a rusty old filing cabinet, or even a shoebox, you can use TruckLogix to keep detailed digital records for all your documents. Plus, with a web client and an app, you can access your documents from anywhere.
Never lose another document with TruckLogix, the premier management solution for transportation professionals.
And we're back. We'd be remiss if we didn't somehow mention the tragedy that occurred in Las Vegas last Sunday night. Undoubtedly, this is a horrific event. Our hearts are with the families of those that were affected by this horrible nightmare of an event. It's too often, in this country that we have to have these moments where we talk about things like this. But unfortunately, if we wait until there's not one, there simply will never be a time to talk about things like this. So I think we, are obviously together in expressing our condolences and sending our regards to the families of those affected by this. But unfortunately, it's not enough. In my opinion, I think we still need to make some sort of we need to do something when these things happen. Our country has a history of these things come, they take place, everyone's horrified by them, and then somehow we always end up going back to the way things were. We just kind of ease back into our lives after these types of events occur with no real solution or no real changes that take place. Now, there people are all over the spectrum on these issues when you start talking about gun control and things like that. But there's quite a lot of room between not doing anything and taking everyone's guns away. So I think we need to kind of have that conversation, talk about that. I know people have different opinions. This country has a long history of the right to bear arms and things like that. But at the same time, I think the people that wrote those laws, our founding fathers, I think they would be pretty horrified if they were in Las Vegas on Sunday night to see those things happen. I think they would not have expected, that guns would eventually become the mass murder weapons that they are today. They held one bullet, in 1776. That would be, there just wasn't an equivalent to that. This is the work of an entire army, when you think about, the type of devastation that occurred in Las Vegas.
Our condolences definitely with all of the families.
Yeah,
Yes.
for sure.
This is a tragedy that's happening way too often.
It is. It's happening too often. There's statistics, you can go through them. I mean, there have been 372 mass shootings in the United States in 2015. You do the math, that's one a day. And that's considering a mass shooting to be a shooting of 4 people. So, that's 372. That's every single day there is a mass shooting, and it's horrifying. In 2015, there were 64 school shootings, according to a group that set up to read this. Now, that's 64 shootings. That's just a gun being fired. It's not necessarily 64 attacks with injuries, but again, that's just another ridiculous fact. The number of gun murders per capita in the United States in 2012 was the most in recent years, nearly 30 times that of the UK. You can look at it study after study, statistic after statistic, and I can't justify not doing something at this point. It's just, I'm not saying that we should go take everyone's guns away, but there needs to be something that can be done, whether that's through some simple things that across the board are relatively agreeable, whether that's preventing the mentally ill from buying guns, preventing people on a no-fly list from buying guns, running background checks for sales at private gun shows, things like that, or banning assault weapons. If you're using it for hunting, I don't understand why you would need an assault rifle. I understand for personal protection and hunting and things like that, but it's...
I agree with the fact that with the legislation that was written many years ago, we have to get caught up with the reality and the technology that we have available. When the legislation was written, of course, the guns could only hold 1 bullet, maybe a few at most. Right. There was no psychological evaluations that are available now, no networks to hold the information. I think with all the things that we have now in the 21st century, we can definitely come together and update the gun control rules. Right now, there is more control to buying a bottle of wine than it is to buying a gun.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
It's an interesting note to consider. Back 1772, 1 bullet in a gun.
Yeah.
And you have to think, most people who had a gun at that point in time had it for their own safety and to provide food for their table.
Exactly.
So even owning a gun and using a gun was revered because it meant life in many ways to you. It meant food on your table, a life taken to feed you, and it meant protection of your own life.
Right.
Wild West, animals, etc. Like, there were many uses thereof. So it is interesting to consider that we've not allowed technology to keep up we've not accounted for technology as we've improved. I'm a big Second Amendment person. I have guns. I do not care to see them taken away. However, I do completely hate the fact that we have people who, unchecked, can get weapons of mass destruction and destroy people's lives. I think it's unfair. I think that as a society, we need to take an evaluation not only of are we keeping up with technology as things change, but also, are we glorifying guns? Has this become a societal norm? Do we, all of our video games, how many video games have your kids seen or have you seen that have guns and violence? And, I don't know. We can go on and on with that. However, it doesn't change the fact that I really do see a lot of room for improvement, even in wanting to keep my Second Amendment rights.
Yeah. That's true. I mean, there's a lot of arguments that the people like to make around this time. They say oh, it's never a good, it's not a right time to talk about something like this after a tragedy.
It never is.
It's never going to be. It's never going to be the right time. They say that only outlaw guns and only bad people will have them. That's a typical argument.
Well, criminals don't follow laws.
That's true. Criminals don't follow laws, but you could still try to make it a little harder for the criminals to get them.
Yeah. We have to remember though, if we're making it harder for a criminal who doesn't follow the laws to get it, how much harder is it for the law-abiding citizen to get it? There's a catch-22 there.
There's something.
There's something. I think it's definitely of note, particularly when we talk about mental illness.
Exactly.
The thing that I believe gets difficult there is how do you classify someone as mentally ill? Have you taken an antidepressant in your entire life? Most people have to answer yes. So does that give you that qualification? Where is the line?
Yeah.
And like you said, there's never a good time to have these conversations, but the best time to have it is just to start talking.
Right. And that's the thing, to start talking about it. And I mean, sure, the mentally ill thing, that is something that's relatively hard to prove.
Yes.
I mean, you could have, this fellow in Las Vegas, he may have, he passed a background check. He may have never had any sort of history of mental illness, but he still, it still got through. So there's that. I mean, obviously, you're never going to have a system that works perfectly, but even something as simple as preventing people on the no-fly list from buying guns. That's something that 80% of people agree with across party lines. It's not like a Republican or a Democrat issue. But somehow, there's enough influence in Congress and the Senate to prohibit that from being a rule on the books. That we, if you can't fly, you can't buy a gun. It seems a little ridiculous.
Seems like a no-brainer.
It seems like a no-brainer. I mean, that's the thing, and most people agree on it. There's a lot of things that most people agree on across the board. But you turn on the TV, you listen to people talk, you think it's completely white and black. And nobody, there's no room in the middle for people to agree on anything anymore. But I think there are some common sense things, and I think just talking about them, or at least introducing some ideas with bipartisan support, is not going to be the worst thing for this country. I feel like there's just this complete aversion to doing anything after these types of events occur, and I think we need to do something, even if it's something simple. You're banning the use of automatic weapons or assault rifles or whatever that may be. If we can get people to agree that it's something that needs to be done, I don't know why it's not Congress's job to make that happen.
Exactly, I agree. If we as a nation want to make a decision that will affect ultimately every single one of us and our loved ones, maybe we as a country have to come to a vote. Every single person who is eligible to vote can go out and vote and cast their opinion.
I agree with you, Elena. It really probably should not be left to just our elected officials, but that should become something, if it's this much of a personal conversation for all of us, and that's a good representation. We're all across the board on this idea of the Second Amendment, and we all still can agree on the fact that it should be our choice to tell our government how this is handled. No, I don't ever want to see anybody die for anything that I have. I'm so thankful for our military that's willing to put their lives on the line, and I, grieve for these people and their families who've lost their lives this week, but definitely think it should be something that we can all come together on to have a voice in the conversation.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's that's the thing. That talking about it like this, people come from different perspectives, but there's still a lot of things that people can agree on. It seems ridiculous, that the way it's covered in the news, it makes it seem like it's sort of a black and white issue. The way Congress treats it, it's like it's completely two different sides that you got to go all one way or all one other way. I think there's middle ground, and people need to find it. I don't think it's that hard for people to make those attempts.
I think we also need to understand that the gray area is a big gray area.
It's huge. It's huge.
It's not just a teeny tiny line that we all need to pick up on this much,
Right.
agree down to this many number of things. It can still be a big gray area, but we need to start making the margin smaller.
Sure.
On both
sure.
sides.
I mean, I think taking everyone's guns away is, it's far-fetched. I mean, it's probably just too late for this country. I mean, it's not a realistic goal. I mean, they did that in Australia after they had a tragedy. They did a huge government buyback program. They've seen great results from it. But again, probably not something that would necessarily work in America, given the fact that there's at least a gun for every person in this country, and then there's just the scale of it would be enormous to do something like that. That being said, there's a lot that could be done between taking everyone's guns away and not doing anything, and letting these kinds of things just continue to happen until, who knows, until somebody decides that they're going to feel something, or they think that, I don't know, maybe we shouldn't just have everybody, maybe you have to carry a gun everywhere just to make sure that you have a gun whenever the massacre happens, that you can try to fight back. It's just a sad reality. It should not,
Yeah, I don't agree with carrying a gun around. Anyone can have a bad day.
It's
just gonna go bad.
There's study after study you could look at that indicate that an increase in guns will indefinitely yield an increase in gun deaths per capita. Wherever you see a massive spike in gun purchases, whether that's looking at states specifically, you can look at countries. Wherever there is an increase in guns per capita, you will also see an increase in gun deaths per capita. Yeah. And that includes suicide. That's a topic that is not brought up as much, but it is an undeniable fact that if guns were harder to obtain, there would be fewer suicides by gun. And that is by far the most common suicide vehicle is through firearms. So, you can have your opinions on this across the board. Feel free to chime in, respond to this, comment below. I'll be happy to take a look at that. But
we want to start the conversation.
Yeah, no, sure. Yeah, start the conversation. It's not us saying this is the way something should be. It's just expressing different thoughts and trying to find some common ground between those.
Absolutely.
All right.
Well, thank you for having us.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Charles.
All right, awesome. Thanks for joining us. If you want to comment below, we'd love to hear about it. Maybe we'll check out your comments on air next week. We appreciate you joining us.